everybody. How's it going? First day of PAX. Hopefully you weren't out too late at the bars last night, or maybe you were because you love/hate yourself. Welcome to the Life is Strange 2 panel. So we are super excited to be here today to talk about the relatable characters and bringing the universe of Life is Strange to life across this season. We've got a fantastic lineup here of folks. So I'm just going to start by introducing myself. I'm Andrea Rene. If you've been to any of our, oh, thank you, Phil. If you've been to any of our Life is Strange panels in the last couple of years, you may have seen me moderating, because I'm such a huge fan of this franchise and everything that Don't Nod is doing. If you haven't seen me at a panel before, maybe you've seen me on Kind of Funny Games or on my show, What's Good Games. Hopefully you guys can check those out. And without further ado, I think I'm just going to go ahead and pass it down to Michel, the director of the game, to kick off the introductions.
Hi guys, thanks for being here. So sorry I'm the only French guy here, so you can hear that. But hopefully they will talk way better than me. They're good voices. And so yes, I'm the co-creative director of the game on Life is Strange 2 and before on Life is Strange and Captain Spirit.
I'm Philip Bach. I'm the voiceover director. I direct the performances from the actors, and I work alongside Michelle and Don't Nod to make that happen. Yeah.
Hey guys, thank you all so much for coming. I'm Gonzalo Martin, and I play Sean Diaz.
I'm Roman George, and I play Daniel Diaz in Life is Strange 2.
All right, and we do want to give a shout out to everybody watching on Twitch, of course. We know that there's lots of people that can't be with us here in Seattle but are watching on the interwebs. I had the pleasure of working with both Michel and Phil on previous Life is Strange panels over the last couple of years, which has been awesome. But it's so great to meet you two today. And if you guys here in the audience want a chance to maybe have a more close chat with them or perhaps take photos and stuff, they will be at the Life is Strange 2 party tonight. So we are doing the What's Good Games Relax at PAX. It's from 7 to 10 at Art Marble. It is open to everybody. It's free admission, and it's all ages until 9 p.m. So hopefully we'll see you guys out there later. And we have some really cool giveaways. Beachy Dubs. Probably going to say that again at the end of the panel. All right, so who here, by show of hands, is caught up through episode 4? Okay, we anticipate. Well, we know episode 4 recently came out, and there's a lot of games to play all the time, but we're going to do our best to avoid major decision spoilers specifically for episode 4, but this is your fair warning that episodes 1 through 3, we're probably going to touch on some pretty heavy story beats, because it'd be really difficult to talk about these characters and what's happening in the season without us talking about what's happening in the season. So I just want to give everybody watching and everybody in the room just your official spoiler warning, but we will do our best to protect what we can from episode 4. Cool? We all in agreement? Yeah. Nobody left. Excellent. Okay, so speaking of this season, Michel, I think it would be a good idea to maybe just kind of give like a high-level overview for people who are maybe haven't even played this season yet or have only played 1 or 2 episodes about kind of where we're at right now.
Yep. I will try to avoid big spoilers, but yes, so for those of you who doesn't really know the game, the idea of Life is Strange 2 is that we're telling this story of those 2 brothers, Sean and Daniel Diaz. Sean is 16 years old, Daniel is 9 years old. They are living in Seattle with their father. They are Mexican Americans. And one day a terrible incident happens where their father, Esteban, is shot by a police officer on a police mistake. And that's when we reveal that the young brother, Daniel, has those superpowers of telekinesis, which kills the cop and puts them in a really bad situations where they're forced to flee the police because Sean thinks that there is no other way that they will get arrested, they won't get a fair trial. So he just thinks quickly, irrationally, and he brings his brother with him, and they try to run away with this crazy idea to reach Mexico, where their father still owns a plot of land. So the whole season is about their journey, them being chased by the police on the run, forced to hide and to live on the outskirts of society. And that's the idea of the game, that they will be facing and meeting a lot of different characters on their way, trying to reach this goal. And Sean, who is a teenager, now is the only parent figure for Daniel. So the big idea of the game is really this theme of education, where Sean just has to be responsible for Daniel to teach him what's good, what's bad, and where I think basically he would still love to be a teenager, but he just has to do with this bad situation. And yes, without spoiling more, they will face a lot of various difficult situations where we just want to show to the players just a big picture of the rural America, the different kind of outcasts and different kind of characters you could meet on the road.
It's really interesting hearing you speak about it after having, Christian, who was the lead writer on the project, talk about this last year. Now, having 4 episodes out, this idea really of the road trip and how this season really embodies that. And we all knew that there was going to be tough stuff because it's Life is Strange, but I don't think I personally anticipated just how different each episode would feel from each other. And I'd love to hear from you guys that have worked on it if there was any challenges that you found, kind of going from episode to episode, or if you were able to kind of find those common threads.
I will say that something difficult was like when you run into all these different new places, more so even the characters, like even Finn, it's you gotta meet him quick, you gotta kind of like him quick. There's got to be something about it, and I felt like the writing on their part and the build-up of the characters and how they designed their interaction and the interaction he would have with those characters, like each one and how they would play was, it's a difficult balance, but all the actors kind of brought something to each role, and especially Finn. Like Finn was great. For me, that's the weird thing. I knew we would be traveling a lot. I was interested to see who would come and go. And like Finn kind of had the ending of one episode, in the main episode. So it was like we got to stick with some people a little bit, but overall I knew there was going to be a lot of hello, goodbye situations, which was tough.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't know if any of you felt this way. I was unsure about Brody at first. I was like, is he going to break bad? Is this going to be a bad thing? Was anybody else getting that vibe from Brody? Yeah, a couple of you? I was so glad that he turned out to be a good guy.
While I was reading it, I was like, please don't do this. Please don't do this.
We didn't.
Yeah. But I thought it was going to be bad. I thought it was going to be like, come on into the back. And I was like, no.
Well, especially when you stumble upon him in that market and he's looking at some very questionable things on his laptop. I was like, oh, no, please. It's too early. It's only like the beginning of the season. But Gonzalo, I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about the character Sean. So, Michel was explaining how he kind of was thrust into this immense responsibility with his little brother and kind of having to figure it out like really on the fly about what am I going to do with what's in front of me. How did you find that as an actor when you were reading through the script for the first time?
That's a really interesting question, because for me, it was really a lot about reverse engineering. This was the first voiceover gig that I had ever done. So, of course, I was excited and ready to get to work and do my lines. And, of course, the character that I was playing is in a completely different headspace than I was at the moment. And, thanks to Phil, he directed me into the direction so as that I would get into Sean's headspace of, I don't have everything good in life. My dad just died. I have now to, take care of my little brother and become a father basically when I'm 16. So it was a lot of getting me out of myself, being, confident and excited of doing this job, and getting more into the character and getting, beat down like Sean was through the entire series.
Nice. I was just thinking, one of the major themes of the Life is Strange franchise is this idea of relatable characters. And throughout, the 3 iterations of Life is Strange that we've gotten, I think there's been characters that kind of touch a variety of us out there that are fans of this franchise. But Roman, you are, a teenager. You play a young boy in the game. Seems like you have something relatable there, but how did you deal with the idea that you're like, I'm kind of a superhero with these wild powers?
When I first got the job, and it was also my first voiceover gig, and when I read the script, it was like, wow, I'm a superhero. I can have powers. And that was actually really cool. and I enjoyed everything.
Are you happy with the powers that they gave you, or would you have picked a different power for yourself?
I like this power. This power is nice.
I mean, I would take it. I wouldn't kick it out of bed, you know what I mean? It's pretty great. I would like to maybe kind of pivot back to the realistic settings. So clearly we're on the west coast of the United States. We obviously passed by Arcadia Bay, which is like a cool little moment in the game, but I really liked how different each of these places felt. Did you guys have a specific favorite place of the places we've seen so far?
You want to go ahead?
I'll say this, is that Michel has actually come over here a lot and done a lot of different vacations around this area, and I think.
But it's for work.
But I think all of that experience and that fascination of different cultures. It's the idea of if Americans were gonna tell the story of this area, we might not tell it so romantically. It's like different viewpoint of the different places. What I like is I felt like they captured more of that versus me. It's like I probably would have painted a different picture, and I always find that fascinating. I think, what was the name of that? There was a Will Smith film where he was trying to get into the stock market. I forget the name of the film.
He was nominated for an Oscar.
Pursuit of Happiness. But it was directed by a foreign film director, and I think for the same reason. It's to tell that kind of story, I felt like it needed it. But as far as favorite...
We're too close to it kind of a thing? We can't see it for its greatness?
Yeah. But favorite location, it's tough. I really liked the crossing of paths that happened with Captain Spirit a lot.
Small town in Oregon.
Because that was episode 2,
yeah.
And I knew that, because we know Life is Strange, things are probably going to get worse. So it was just nice for a moment to be okay, we're at home, we're with our grandparents, Captain Spirit's nearby, I can chill out for a second. That's nice, because I know that it's the rug pull's coming.
I think, we've been doing a lot of travel in the United States with Raoul and Jean-Luc, the other director and our writer. And there is something unique with this country. There is so many different parts of it, you feel that in each state, you feel that it's really a different place. And that's something I think that works really well for us as a setting, is that we can tell stories about a lot of different characters, a lot of different lifestyle, that you have all those differences in this country. That motivates us a lot, because we think that we can talk about humanity maybe as a whole, as using the United States. And that was really the goal of this game, of going to this road trip approach that can be also confusing, I know, for the player, to have those different characters, different places that you just meet for one episode and you leave behind. And I get that it can be hard to that you might want to be in your comfortable place by staying with those characters. But I think that that's something that's important when you're traveling. You meet a lot of people where you have to just connect in a short amount of time. And you get good memories from those. And that's something we wanted to have in this game, to just have all those memories of all those characters that you meet that create this journey for Sean and Daniel and will shape them at the end of the game.
It's not unlike being at PAX, right? You're here for a short amount of time, and hopefully you're going to cross paths with someone that you connect with, and maybe you become friends online, and that becomes a meaningful thing, even though it was very brief, right? What about you two? Did you guys have a favorite place?
He liked being locked up a lot. Those scenes, that was his favorite. I got you covered.
Those were the best ones, yeah. No, to piggyback on what Michel said, I would have to agree on that. I'd have to say that that's one of my favorite things about this Life is Strange game. The fact that it's, on the road, it gives us the opportunity to constantly be on new settings, meeting new people from different walks of life. And like Phil said, I think it's cool that, they're taking care of it, and it's not, American developers doing it, because maybe the story would have been told from a different perspective. That's not from an outsider's view. And I really like what they did with, each person that we meet through the road, each setting that we go to. I don't want to be biased, and it's not because I'm here in Seattle for the first time, but on episode 1, that was the settings and like the landscapes and everything and the music. That was definitely my favorite in comparison to all of the other ones regarding to like the settings of the place. And then having to, you know, move from state to state allowed us to like meet, you know, what are the people from this state like, and what are their cultural differences from, you know, us that we're from Seattle to Mexican American kids. So that's what I think is really cool about this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really interested how it felt like it showed a side of Seattle that I haven't seen. And obviously I don't live here, but I've been here several times for events and for PAX and things like that. And I think a lot of us who come here from out of state or out of town really only identify Seattle with like the Space Needle and like downtown, and everyone who's local is like, yeah, that's just a tiny little part of our place we call home.
As a small story, we are not allowed to put the Space Needle in the game because
really?
It's a copyrighted building. So even if you wanted to show it, we can't.
The Hollywood sign, you got to do the same thing. You can't put it. You got to pay some guy who was smart enough to put it in there years ago.
Well, you can't really blame him, but it's kind of a bummer.
Why are you building this? You'll see.
To charge people every time they photograph it. Yeah, you know,
Roman,
I get it.
Did you have a favorite place?
I'm gonna have to say episode 1 too. Just the travel and the road trip of going in the forests and the rivers and all that. That was my favorite.
Yeah, I thought it was a really great transition going, and how each episode really visually is represented by the location of it. But I do want to transition a little bit into some other things that are kind of indicative of the Life is Strange universe and franchise overall. Clearly, there's an importance of this franchise to represent the marginalized in society. And what's great about Don't Nod as a studio with, you know, the backing of Square Enix is that you guys aren't afraid to tackle these super, super taboo topics, super tough, heavy things to talk about. And this season definitely doesn't shy away from that at all. I mean, it's like, bam, right at episode 1, and then it just feels like it just keeps going.
Good. Go ahead.
I was going to say this. It's like when you play the game, a lot of the times I read a lot of the comments. Sometimes you guys will know that I'm there because sometimes I'll just leave a little smiley face. That's like me being like, I was here. Sometimes we can look at it, even whenever I read the script, sometimes I'm like, oh man, this is going to be rough, or this is a tough topic, or tough type of character. The problem is, everything in the game exists. It all exists. And there's a lot of people that there's still a lot of racism, everything exists. But the thing is, this game puts it in a place where it's all kind of put together. So maybe at times for people, it feels a little too much, but I think the point of that is to just call attention to it. And I think it's better to do that, just as much as they did it in the first game.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's a need. I don't think that there is that every video game needs to tackle those subjects. That's what's great with gaming nowadays, is that it's such a big space where you can have all kind of stories, of characters, of games. But I do think that there is still a need to have some of, I think what we're trying to do is sometimes to talk about the people we're not talking about often enough, or just, it's a really powerful medium where as a player you have the interactivity, you are in the shoes of the character, and we think that putting the player in some situation that he might never experience by himself, or he might not know that much about, it can bring some awareness to some subjects that we think are worth talking about. Just a quick example, for example, the drifters, the three migrants in episode 3, so Finn, Cassidy, and all the crew. Those characters are based on people we did meet when we were traveling and we were in Humboldt County. We were in this town called Arcata, where it's basically the hub for marijuana farming, and all the guys who just want to have a work are waiting there with their cardboard panels, saying that I will trim for money or looking for work. And we had a chance to talk with some of those where they explained how difficult it was. Like, they told us about the missing persons that happened in this area. Like, it's not easy money. It's some work that you can do for money, but it's hard, it's complicated, and there is a lot of issues, like some of those farms are still illegal, even if the marijuana has been legalized in Oregon, in Northern California. But yeah, there is a lot of people that are missing, and we talked about those guys that they had friends that didn't know where they were, and that's why we put this side story with Penny in episode 3, trying to just talk about those guys that maybe most of us would not even look at them when we just pass next to them in a street or somewhere.
No, it was an interesting thing to bring in because I think the idea of like homelessness and displacement is something that is rarely, if at all, tackled in video games, right? Or really in media at large. I mean, we've seen it more in TV and film, but I thought it was really great to bring put a face on what that looks like and say, hey, this is a thing that you maybe don't want to look at in your day-to-day life, but we have to talk about what this means and obviously its implications for the characters in the game.
Yeah, I mean, we had those awesome conversations with people that, like I said, we wouldn't maybe talk to most of the time. So that's why we are thinking that in this game, especially with this story, where Sean and Daniel are outcasts themselves, they will meet other outcasts, and we thought that it was a good story to give a voice to those different kind of outcasts.
And that only proves, like I remember, because they had the Netflix documentary that came out, right, on Humboldt, right?
Yeah, it was a documentary, Murder Mountain.
Yeah, Murder Mountain. Yeah. And they were writing on it prior to that coming out. So it just also, like, for me, it just shows, like, they did the research. It wasn't like this stuff came from nowhere, and it's like, I know this. It's like, it comes from a real place, and that's the thing, is like, when people are on there saying, like, I can't believe they put that character in there, it's like, we can't believe that guy exists, you know?
Yeah, it was interesting because it almost felt it was almost serendipitous in a way, how you guys were touching on some of these themes, you know, when you were originally writing the game and coming up with the idea for the narrative, you know, a few years back, and how those themes are just as important today. Because there's obviously a risk when you create a story that's so heavily focused on these really intense storylines that do revolve around these real-world problems that are happening, of like maybe that problem in 2015 isn't going to be a problem in 2019. But sadly, they still are. Yeah. So let's transition, shall we? So because we have Gonzalo and Roman here, I thought it would be really fun to talk to you guys about some of the work that you did with Phil. So we were talking a little bit before the panel began about some of your favorite scenes to do. So Phil, did you have a favorite scene that you loved directing the best?
I don't know. For me, it's like, it's hard to say. I think for me, the bigger thing is that it's not really a scene. It's the transition, specifically in actors, that I see. It's a weird thing to answer because it's like specific scene.
What if I take the word favorite out, just like a cool scene that you did? I won't make you choose the best one.
Moments with Finn, moments with, I forget the name of the actor who did the hospital stuff, the nurse. He was great in the interaction between there. Because what was nice, it's that thing you do sometimes in writing where it's like as soon as it came in, they give each other the high five and the hug. You see the connection ahead of time. That interaction for me was fun. It's such a small scene. It's such a small moment in comparison to like some of the bigger stuff. But I really love that, and I love the Finn stuff, the Cassidy stuff. At times, it's like what we expected Life is Strange to be like, oh, it was this big crazy thing that happened in the tornado. No, I love this little thing of this moment, because you don't care about the big stuff unless you have this
And
stuff.
sometimes those scenes are the most complicated to get right, because, I mean, you will talk about it, the big emotional scenes, it's hard, and it's taxing on you when you do those. But the small ones, with just a small natural, subtle conversation, it's also really hard to get it right, because that's what we are trying to push for in those games, is to have this kind of realism that just makes some of those small dialogues feel just conversational, natural, and it's not that easy.
They're trying to hide the stuff. Like it's the subtext, right? It's like he says this, but I'll tell them like I actually want you to say it in a way that sounds like you're not staying. Like, even though the question is about something else, like, how's the weather?
What's that mean?
I'm leaving. Like, Yeah.
Roman, did you find it challenging or maybe exciting to have this dichotomy between these, really kind of intimate moments with your brother where it's just like the two of you, but then you have these really crazy moments where you're doing this wild stuff with your powers?
Yeah, with the powers, actually my favorite scene was the hotel scene. And just because it kind of like showed who my character really is. And also with Gonzalo, us being brothers, it kind of really connected. And we both played off of each other really nicely.
If only I could get so excited about a bubble bath.
Yeah,
That was fun. That was fun. I did like those lines.
for me, it was very enjoyable. Pretty much recording everything. Now that they mention it, yeah, like the scenes where it's all about the moment and the tender moment between the characters, I really enjoyed recording because it just felt like talking to a normal person, and it felt nice. But, playing Sean, I definitely had to do a lot of emotional scenes on all of the episodes, and that was very, very taxing. But I wouldn't say I have a specific favorite one, but I'd have to say that every time, after every episode that, like, I would leave the studio having recorded an emotional scene, even though it would be like super taxing and I would end up exhausted and mad and tired and angry and everything, I would leave feeling so fulfilled that like we just did that amazing work. Like I know that if Phil said that we got it, and like it's gonna sound amazing, and I just feel very fulfilled that he allowed me to get there.
It'd be interesting to hear from both of you a little bit about the process of being a voice actor, because I think there's maybe a lot of misconceptions from people who aren't familiar. I think we think, oh, you start at the beginning, then you read it all the way to the end, but you do jump around quite a bit. That must be really difficult emotionally.
Yeah. You want to?
Yeah, sometimes we'll go from a very casual scene to a very emotional scene, which turns into a big transition. And those scenes, the only reason me and Gonzalo, I believe, are like top notch in our voice acting is because of Phil. I mean, he pushes us to the extent, and then look at our work.
So you'd give him a 5-star review?
Oh yeah, no, 10-star, 10-star.
What about for you, Gonzalo? I think you already paid it.
I mean, it's kind of hard, yeah, because it's not like we get the whole story ahead of time and we get to prepare and everything. Like we literally sometimes get the scripts the night before or maybe a day or two before, and we gotta sit down, learn the lines, figure out what headspace the character is in at each specific moment. And of course, we're recording the beginning of the episode, or sometimes we start recording the ending of the episode and then all the filler. Which is weird, but I'm an actor, so I just do
Phil's
it.
got a process, apparently.
Yeah, but Phil is really good at that. The thing about Phil is he's really good at being able to differentiate. Okay, this is a really hard scene, and this is he'll cruise over this. So he'll divide it in a way where we'll do the hard stuff, mix a little bit of the easy stuff in the middle, do a break, then do the hard stuff, get it over, and that way it's not incredibly taxing on us.
And there is also all the added complexity of this is a game with branching. So there's a lot of lines that we send to Phil and to you, and like, why am I saying this line a new time with a different meaning? I mean, they don't see all the graphs, all the branching dialogues. They don't have the visuals of everything. So I have to explain a lot to Phil what's happening, and Phil has to guide them to explain, okay, this is the branch when you're happy, the branch where I mean, for Daniel, there is a lot of variations, like this is a branch where you like your brother, this is a branch where you're not in that good relationship with Sean, or this is a branch where you're a good kid, or the branch where you're just a bit evil. So there's a lot of variation on those lines.
No, go ahead.
To their credit, they, it's one thing, I think I said this last year, but it's like, in previous Life is Strange games, it's like we had some time to get to that episode 3, episode 4 moment where you were like shot real hard in the heart, and so was the character. But like for them, it was like from the get-go. So to get there that quick, like
You're talking about the original Life is Strange story
Yeah.
versus Life is Strange 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even in like most stories, right, you end up getting to that third act where it's like, oh, this is the Dark Knight of the Soul, the true Dark Knight of the Soul. And for me, it was like episode 1, few hours, you're like, bah! And they're immediately hit with it. And for them to like tackle it that quickly, like I definitely pushed them, but they were ready for it because it's very easy for an actor to be like, you know, to give a lot of pushback, but they trusted me on it. But even furthermore, like, so he has to do a lot of up and down emotional level based on order of scripts, or sometimes they need to handle they need to start animating a specific scene early. So even if it's more difficult, we have to do it early to get it to that. There are just so many different things that happen with games that change how things work. And then with him, he has to do both versions of like, well, how have I been taught, you know, by my older brother? Where are things going? So yeah, it's confusing, but they ride the wave really well. It's always interesting, the side characters that come in. Sometimes they'll be like, I don't understand. Do I walk in the room first or do I open the door? It's like, you're complaining about that? Do you know what these guys have to go through? Yeah.
Have there been moments that you guys have acted out in the first couple of episodes, a decision that you see your character make that you're like, man, why'd they do that?
I mean, there's the cool thing about the game is that there's always a variety of options. So of course there's always one that I'm like, I wouldn't do that one.
I'm asking you to I'm putting your feet to the fire, Gonzalo. Which one was it? Let's talk about it.
I don't know. There has been so many decisions through the game, and I also don't want to give any spoilers out for episode 4. But for instance, I really do enjoy watching people play through the game.
Like streaming?
Yeah. I'll scroll through the moments that I know are the important ones.
What did they think about me there? What did they say about me?
No, but like I'll see the direction that they'll take the story in, and I get really surprised sometimes at the direction that people take the story, because it's like, why would you do that? So I don't play, but I watch other people play, and I'm like, I would have gone the other way.
No, it's really fascinating because one of the unique things about this franchise, I think that we all love about it, is that we all come to these scenes with a different perspective.
Yeah.
And when you do your spoiler cast with your friends, you have those water cooler moments, and you're like, so what did you do here? And what happened in your playthrough? It's like you really get that diverse cross-section of how people are interpreting these scenes, which is why I thought it was a really interesting choice to have that influence with Sean influencing Daniel's actions in the game. It's something that we talked about at the panel at PAX last year with Christian, but I don't think I ever saw those moments really outright. And I think what's great and genius about that is that it reflects true life, that you don't really understand how the little things you do day to day influence the people around you.
Yeah, and I mean, you will see, of course, more of it with episode 5.
Yeah,
and
I was going to say that.
Yeah, without spoiling anything or spoiling too much. Yeah, episode 5 will be the episode with the most variations based on everything you did in the previous episode. I know it's still a tricky. I mean, in the first Life is Strange, we had those clear choices that had one clear consequence. Here, we have a system that is more a lot of small things that affects another thing. So it's less, I would say, in the face of the player. You have less possibility to say, okay, it's exactly because I did that Daniel is doing that, which I think might been frustrating for some of you. I don't know. But I think overall the idea for us, what we wanted to create with those two brothers and with Daniel is trying to have it's not an education simulator, but it's a bit of that, like a lot of what you say, what you do, how you interact when Daniel looks at you, it impacts him, and it will change a bit how he sees, how he differentiates right and wrong, and how he sees Sean as a supportive brother or an oppressive brother. And this is those two aspects that are mixed in most of the consequence in the later episodes. And hopefully it will make you have a playthrough that feels natural in a way, in the way how Daniel reacts.
To that, it's just a crazy thing to design on a game, you know, to be like, you can't control this, you can guide this. And even when you ask or tell this to do this, it may or may not do that. I love that. Like, I kind of like the chaos of that in games, because the whole idea is to have a lot of control in games, but that's what makes it feel a little bit more livable or real. But also based on choices, my favorite thing, and I'll have friends call me, like, who play the game from like across the US, who are like, what do you mean I could do this? What choice? Where was that? What? Am I getting penalized for not doing that? Like, at the end of the episode when you do that, a part of me loves it. The other part of me is like, I worked on the game. I don't know where this is.
You just didn't point him to the Wikia? And be like, it's all online, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't want to find it, obviously don't go find it. But like, if you want to know everything that happens with all the choices, there's plenty of walkthrough.
Yeah, I love the fans that do all the, like, you know.
They're
Here's
doing
what
the
happens
Lord's
if you do
work,
this.
really. I
Here's
can't
what-
play
yeah.
that many branches. It hurts my heart.
Yeah.
Somebody does it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Whoever you are out there, there's actually multiple peoples. How many of you have played the episodes multiple times to see multiple ways it plays out?
Yeah.
So that's you.
That's a lot of hands.
I like to shake hand, like, my original decision was the right decision, but the other, I'll see what you did.
It's really cool to see when players try a lot of variations and see all the different parts. I mean, in the end of the episode, we have these recap screens where you can see a lot of what you could have done differently for Sean, and also a lot of what a lot of what Daniel could have done differently. But we still even don't put everything in there. There is a lot of small variations of dialogues that are not even explained in the last recap screen. So the idea is really not to push you to play it multiple times. I mean, for me, it's perfectly fine if you just play the game once and you have your story, your version, but it's still there for, if you like to see the variations, like to really try different things with Daniel and the game. And hopefully when you'll see episode 5, you will want to replay it.
I feel like the decisions have snowballed into episode 5. Like, I don't know, if the people have played, hopefully you've been able to notice, like, episode 1, it's like, you two are together and you're kind of guiding them, and then it's like those decisions, like, later on as it keeps going, when you get into trouble or better, worse situations, that's when things start to change more. And I think episode 5 is a big one. Yeah.
And
Episode
we should say,
5.
we just see a character here when you played his voice. The guy, him, asleep.
I haven't even seen it. They were like,
my figure didn't go this way.
You played a voice?
they were like, we need a jerk. Where are we gonna find him? Oh, I got him.
So yeah, if you play episode 4, the sleeping guard, when he's not asleep, it's him.
That looks like me and my dad. It's like that in between. That's gonna be me when they're like, we don't want you to work in games anymore.
I thought I recognized that voice. Well, we're going to get into Q&A in just a couple of minutes. So if you guys have some questions ready, we'll have you line up in just a couple minutes. But before we get there, I did want to ask you, since we do have the 3 of you here, did you guys have any fun stories or moments or takeaways from your sessions together?
Lots of.
Well, I think it's particularly fascinating to hear from you guys as people who've never really done this process before, to be able to work with a guy like Phil who's been with the franchise and to kind of, have that back and forth. Did you guys have some like fun moments, intense moments?
I'll say one story about each of them. I said this last year, but for him, I'm just going to repeat the story because it was just a breath of fresh air. Was like, he did so well at the audition that I thought someone had coached him to this place. And like, I needed to know whether or not he could do this on the fly because a lot of things that I knew were going to come. So I was like, give him your copy. Give him the older brother audition and hand it over to him and see how he does. And he just looked at it and was like, yeah, I kind of know what this is, and did it and killed it. So for me, that was great. I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. Because most of the time I'm handed kid actors because I'm a giant kid and like I like working with kids. But it can be problematic if you don't get something. Because the thing is, acting is based on experience. You have to have personal experience to know where to pull from the emotion to understand it. You can try and fake it, but then my ears, like, I start hearing like it's fake or it's not real, it's not truth. And but yeah, thankfully he killed it. And with him, like, he had to get on board quick. And, you know, in the beginning, it was like, look, man, it's worse. It's got to be this, it's got to be that. It's like, let me paint how terrible of a situation it was. But he rode the wave with me all the way, and I think it shows how well he did.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I mean, mostly I credit a lot of things to Phil. Phil and I had a lot of great moments in the studio, a lot of bad ones as well. But
No money for you.
When I first started doing this gig, like I said, I was super excited, ready to do my lines. I was standing like this in front of the copy, and Sean is a completely different headspace, and he was trying to get me to, no, it's got to be worse. It's got to be worse. I don't believe you. You've never suffered through anything. Really, yeah. And I remember this very specifically. I had to say like thank you. I had to record thank you. That's all. And I kept on doing it. I kept on doing it probably for 58 takes, and we could not get it. And he kept on insisting that it was because I didn't live enough hardships. And he has a point. He has a great point. If you haven't lived something, how can you act it or how can you talk about it authentically if you haven't gone through it?
Because what you have to understand is this guy is a badass. He sails. He can fly. Like, it's crazy, all this stuff. And now you want to, what do you want to do? You want to do the...
I'm doing...
the hand gliding thing?
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing? So I keep trying to play him stuff of like accidents to be like, stop it.
But basically, to finish that thank you story, I was like, man, what does this guy want? And think about it. This was episode 1. I had just been hired on a voiceover gig that I had never done before. I had this very respectable director telling me all these things, and I wasn't really getting it. And so he challenged me to, get myself into Sean's shoes and into his position, and saying like, just go there one day to the streets and like without having lunch, breakfast, nothing, and just hang out there.
Wait, just to clarify, I told him to go. No, just so they know what you're saying is like, if you look at like Robert De Niro did a lot of like nighttime, like he actually did do taxi driving. He did do that. Moonlighting, he would do that. And it's like you have to pull from something, right? So I told him like, you got to know what it's like. There's got to be a moment. So I told him to have only like, I forget how much money to carry. It was just a few bucks.
You told me to just get, a couple, like $3 or $4.
And like survive a day on it. So then because I knew it would put him in a situation where either A, he would have to ask for money, B, he would have to figure out a way to make that money work. But either way, there would come a time where he would want more, be hungrier, and it's like, once you even if you just experienced it for a second, there would just be, you'd be like, oh, crap. Like you would feel it and you would know like how terrible that is.
Yeah.
He did it.
And so I was thinking in my head, don't yell at him, you're gonna get fired. But in my head I was like, you know what, I'm gonna double your bed and I'm gonna go and sleep on the street. So yeah, I went for a weekend and I slept on the street and I finally got it. Like when I was there, living in Sean's shoes, and I picked the worst weekend ever. It rained the whole week. So yeah, it was very tough, and I learned a lot from it. And the following week, I went back into the studio, and we started doing the lines, and I just would like kill all the lines. Line 1, boom, got it. Line 2, next. Line 3, and then Phil stopped me. He was like, "What did you do?" What did you do this time? You're nailing all your lines. You usually suck. What did you do different? I'm like, well, I took your advice and I went to the street, and it took you a little while to believe.
Yeah, I was like, what? No, you did it?
But yeah, from that day onwards, I felt like me and Phil finally understood each other, and that's the day that I finally got into Sean and started cruising.
That's a really cool story. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Hopefully Roman didn't sleep on the street.
I took Roman with me.
I will say, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm just going to say this because this is something I really believe in, is Stanley Kubrick is not alive anymore. The Shining is. The Shining outlives Stanley Kubrick. And I feel like the art that we create, even if it means that we have to be hungry or we're working late nights, this is just me. It's like, this is I love this stuff. It's like being a kid and like the only thing you have is your television or your video game set. It's like, that's what I want. I want things to be great, and the only way you can get there is sometimes through sacrifice. And I feel like these games will outlive us, you know.
I certainly hope so. These stories are amazing, right? We all love Life is Strange. That's why we're here. Absolutely. Well, listen, this has been fantastic. We do want to get some of your guys' questions. So if you do have questions, we have a microphone in the middle here.
Oh,
Yes?
I have a question for the people asking the questions. You know what I felt so bad about? There was a guy who asked a question last year, and he gave us a compliment, but then because the compliment took a little bit, we thought he had asked a question, but then he never actually asked a question. And we were like, oh, you already asked a question, left. So when I reviewed, I was like, I'm so sorry. Anyways, if he's listening or here, sorry.
I think the takeaway there is maybe start with your question.
Yeah.
And then try to keep any extemporaneous dialogue afterwards as brief as you can, because we do have quite a few people that want to ask questions. We'd like to get to as many as we can. And just another reminder, please don't spoil anything with your question if you can avoid it. Thanks.
So when this character died, how did you...
Oh, and please say your name.
Yeah.
Hi guys, I'm Casey. I'm actually a local voice actor. Thank you guys so much for making a game where the storytelling is first. How much of the work in the game with the actors was any of it mocap, or was it all just behind the booth, behind the mic?
Combination, because he directs the mocap overseas in your own place, and then we direct the voiceover here. And it's different for every single game.
Yeah.
We've been working in games for a long time. Every single game is different, and even the same company, same game, sequel will sometimes change. So it's just different, but this time around.
I'd love to have performance capture for this game where we direct everything at the same moment, but for time constraints and budget constraints, we had to shoot the mocap in France with French actors. So what we give them is the first rough version of the script. So we are recording a lot of animation that will make the scene work, but then we write the final dialogue, and then we work with Phil really for the real voices that we will put on top of those animations. And there's a lot of magic that's been done by the camera artists at our studio, who just are using sometimes like 3 minutes of animations to make 20 minutes of game with the voices by reusing the movements and framing and editing.
What I like though is like the day somebody finally lets me direct a movie, they're gonna be like, Phil, you have to get through 7 pages today. And you're doing it all right here. It's like, dude, really? This is easy. Like, because of this stuff. Like, it's all different pieces that get put together at the end that are just, kind of nuts.
Thank you.
Sometimes we'll do something where even Michel has to say like, we have to be careful because we did this in mocap, or you know what, we like what you did there. We're going to see if we can change the performance a little bit. It's just give and pull.
Yeah, because we don't always. I can't always show them the exact scene, the animation. So sometimes you're really in the dark with just our direction to make the voice work. For example, in episode 4, there is a scene where we had Gonzalo had to be angry at someone, at a character. So I won't spoil it. But we did record the voices too loud, too angrily, and it didn't work really with the animation because we were like almost standing still. And we had those voices which needed a body language that we had not. So we had to re-record those lines slightly softer.
But good luck being a VO actor, man.
Thanks.
Rock it out. Put yourself in bad situations. Sleep on the street. No.
Hi, my name is Brandon. I'm very curious. I played the first Life is Strange, and I'm curious how the writing and directing changed as you went from two white women to two who were not related to two brothers who are Mexican-American males. You always see in some movies and games and things like that how sometimes certain genders or certain ethnicities or something are written a little bit differently, almost worse or better than the others. So how was the transition?
Thanks for the question. I think it was for the each time for us when we write the story at first with Raoul and Jean-Luc, the other guys I'm working with, we really think just what do we want to tell about in this game. We are not thinking first about the characters or the setting. It's more, what is our story? For the first Life is Strange, we knew that we wanted to have a coming-of-age story taking place in a high school setting and relying a lot on nostalgia. So when we started working, we went going for those kind of archetypes characters, you know, the cool kid. All the characters in the first Life is Strange, you know that they're based on some archetypes you've seen a lot of times in TV shows. And then we work on Max and Chloe and everything. I mean, then when we started the second game, it was like, okay, we know that we want to make something different to be able to show new themes, new characters, not have the same setting and have really a different feeling. So we started to work on this idea of education, of this brother who had to take care of this younger brother. And then it evolves of just finding them. It's just a question of finding the good references, talking to the right people, making sure that we are telling and writing the characters in a sensible way, trying to portray that in something that feels real. I guess it's what it is, and I cannot speak too much for Jean-Luc because he's the writer, but it's really putting you in the shoes of your character is the writer's job. It's not really to say, okay, I can only write this kind of characters. It's more of thinking about what is your story, what is your main theme, and how you create the best characters for this story.
There's a big difference between, like, James Earl Jones talked about this a long time ago. It's like the idea of, like, white guy playing a black guy or black guy playing a white guy. It's like, it's not really that, but for writers, a writer should be able to write whatever they want to write as long as they're respecting what they're trying to do and doing the research needed. Luckily, in games, something that's really nice is that you get to meet a lot of interesting people. You know, like, yeah, everybody comes from different walks of life. You know, there's, like, what I like is that there's a lot of females in games. Sometimes, like, film especially has a tendency of being not as much. You know, only recently are we starting to see some of that change. But games has usually been this kind of, like, place where you can meet a lot of different kinds of people. So it's not, what I'm trying to say is it's almost easier to tell different kinds of stories in games because of that, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sean, and I'm from Seattle.
Coincidence?
Hi, Sean.
Hey. My question is, since this season is a road trip across the West Coast, and you needed to pace it for 5 episodes of different characters and conflicts in these areas, did you write the characters first, or did you write the locations first and have characters inhabit those locations?
I think it's a bit of both. When we start writing on the story, what we write first is really the beginning and the endings, knowing where we're going, and then the big story beats. And so without spoiling, you've seen that the story beats are going over a lot of, it's like an initiatic journey, you call it that way?
Episodic journey?
And in French we say that voyage initiatique, so initiation journey.
Initiation?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I mean,
say that
meaning like the...
Like for Sean to really grow up and become this father figure.
It's like his path, to become,
And if you look at the title of the episode, we have roads, rules, wastelands, face, and I won't say the name of the title of the last episode.
What was it again, the last episode?
We're going over those themes, so that's when we decide, when we know what we were talking in the episode, we choose what kind of setting and characters. For example, in episode 4, Face, it's a moment where Sean is at its lowest point. He's alone, he's hurt, he's chased by the police. And that's why we decided to have this episode also takes place in Nevada in the desert, with the environment reflects also his state of mind, quite empty and dry and this kind of stuff. So I think we are really creating the characters and choosing the environment based on what we want to tell in a story. And then there are, of course, the different people we did meet that we want to showcase in the game. It's sort of back and forth.
It's that idea of like writing conflict. It's like if somebody who's like, it's always that dumb example of like you put someone who's afraid of heights on a bridge up in a mountain trying to like deliver the ashes of his dad. You know, it's like, so sometimes you can use the location to tell what you want to do in the story. So, you know, we know the hero's journey, right? Yeah. I'm doing it for me, not for you guys, is, you know, his character is down and out. There's things, not to spoil, there are things that have happened to him physically. And then, you know, being put in a position where you're not allowed to leave and you can't all you want to do is do something and you can't do anything. It's like those are the things that like create conflict, you know, because an audience member, you want that feeling of like, oh, I want to, yeah.
And you know, it's interesting when Gonzalo said that his favorite location was Seattle. It's also definitely in the story the favorite location for Sean, of course. It's his home. That's what we wanted to have in this first episode. The first half of episode 1 is really this setting that looks a lot like the first Life is Strange, where you're just a teenager being happy with your family, with your friends, going to a party. This kind of feeling that for Sean is his life. For the player, for us, it would be something that the player would love because it reminds him of home, of the previous game. And then that when the incident happens and is forced to leave that behind, as well as the player is forced to just be on the road and leave the comfort of this cocoon of friends and party and everything.
I like the joke of it, of them being like, I like Seattle. That's where I wasn't crying. I got to like hang out and smoke stuff. I was there with my dad. It's like, you know, just funny. But thank you.
Thank you.
And we only have time for one more question, unfortunately.
However, I'll say this. I usually hang out outside. So it's like if people have questions.
And everybody on the panel will be at the event tonight.
That's true.
We'll be mingling around. It's a really cool space. So if you guys didn't get to ask your question, hopefully you'll come by tonight. But for our final question.
Hi, thank you for all the hard work you put in the game. I think it comes out that obviously it's a love project. I'm a Mexican-American third generation, and this is like the first time where I feel like there's a Mexican protagonist where it's like I actually feel seen. It's not a caricature. Do you guys feel like there's an added pressure making a video game where you know that maybe this demographic is underrepresented?
Big time.
And if you do, how do you kind of deal with that pressure and tell those stories that don't often get told?
Nice shirt, by the way.
Thank you. You too.
I will say this, is that no matter what we were doing, there was the added pressure of a sequel based on how much everybody loved the first one. On top of that, like me, I like watching stories, especially from actors or different people. You hear about this all the time, right? About how people, you know, normally aren't represented. It goes back to like everything. It goes back to like Shaft. It's like, yeah, you hear all these stories. So I think because of those stories, I knew that it was important. And even like my dad's Puerto Rican, so he would tell me stories about coming over here. So that existed. It totally exists. I think what's interesting, though, is knowing it exists ahead of time. At least I did. Yeah.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much to everybody who came to the panel today. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. You guys were awesome. Thanks for the stories. As I mentioned, the event is from 7 to 10 p.m. tonight. It's free admission. Everybody is welcome. Unless you're under 21, then you can only stay until 9. I didn't make the rules.
And just something I just want to add is I'm really thankful for those two guys that we found them for our Sean and our Daniel, because it was it's really tough casting, and those roles are complicated. And when we did hear the auditions, it was really great. And just when we had them in the booth for the first session, I knew that those were our characters, and I was really so happy that we found them, and they're doing an awesome job. So you can really applaud them.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you to our hosts.
Have a great rest of your PAX, everybody.
Thank you.